There is a king in this story. He never left Europe. He never set foot in Africa. Not once. Not for a single day. And yet from his palace in Brussels, sitting behind a desk, signing papers, attending dinner parties, accepting awards for his humanitarian work, he killed 10 million people. Not in a war. Not on a battlefield. He killed them with paperwork. With quotas. With rubber. With a whip made from hippopotamus hide. And with a rule so simple and so monstrous that it became the defining image of one of the darkest chapters in human history. For every bullet his soldiers fired, they had to bring back a human hand, to prove the bullet had not been wasted. This is the story of Léopoldville, the city that King Leopold II of Belgium built on the banks of the Congo River. The city that became the headquarters of the most profitable genocide in history. And the city the world renamed, but never quite managed to forget. If you have never heard this story, you are going to want to stay. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Leopold II became King of Belgium in 1865. Belgium was a small, wealthy, industrialized nation. It had no colonies. And Leopold, ambitious, calculating, obsessed with wealth and power, considered that a personal embarrassment. He watched as Britain, France, Portugal, and the Netherlands carved up the world between them. He watched the wealth flow back to European capitals from Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And he decided that he too would have his piece. The problem was that the Belgian parliament had no interest in colonial adventures. They would not fund him. They would not authorize him. So Leopold went around them. He did not seek a Belgian colony. He sought personal ownership of an entire country. His target was the Congo Basin, an enormous territory in Central Africa covering over 2 million square kilometers. A land of rainforests, rivers, and extraordinary natural wealth. And a land whose people had no idea what was coming. Leopold hired the famous explorer Henry Morton Stanley, the man who had found the missing missionary David Livingstone, and sent him to the Congo with a very specific mission. Sign treaties with as many local chiefs as possible. Secure as much territory as possible. The chiefs who signed those treaties, written in French and English, languages they could not read, believed they were signing trade agreements. They were signing away their land, their resources, and the freedom of their descendants for generations. By 1884, Leopold had enough treaties to make his move. At the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, where the major European powers sat around a table in Germany and divided Africa between themselves without a single African in the room, Leopold presented his case. He told them he wanted to bring civilization to the Congo. He told them he wanted to end the Arab slave trade in Central Africa. He told them he would open the Congo to free trade for all nations. He was lying about all of it. The European powers, eager to prevent each other from gaining too much advantage, agreed to give Leopold personal control of the Congo Basin. On February 5, 1885, King Leopold II established the Congo Free State by seizing the African landmass as his personal possession. Not Belgium. Not a company. Leopold himself. He now owned a country 76 times the size of Belgium. And he had never visited it. On the banks of the Congo River, at the point where the river widened into a vast pool before continuing its journey to the Atlantic Ocean, Leopold's agents established a settlement. They named it Léopoldville. Of course they did. In the beginning it was a small trading post. A collection of wooden buildings, a dock on the river, a handful of European administrators sweating through the Central African heat while Congolese workers built the infrastructure that would allow Leopold to extract everything the land contained. Leopold's regime began construction of the railway that ran from the coast to the capital of Léopoldville. That railway was not built for the Congolese people. It was built to move rubber and ivory from the interior of the continent to the coast, where it could be shipped to Europe and turned into money. Léopoldville sat at the center of this operation. It was the administrative hub. the place where orders came from Brussels and were distributed outward into the vast territory. The place where the rubber arrived from the interior and was loaded onto steamboats heading downstream. From the outside, from the perspective of European visitors who occasionally passed through, it looked like a colonial city. Whitewashed buildings, a governor's residence, churches, a market. From the inside, from the perspective of the Congolese people who built it, served in it, and lived in terror of it, it was the nerve center of a machine designed to consume them. In the 1890s, the global demand for rubber exploded. Every Congolese man was required to meet a rubber quota. A set amount of raw rubber, harvested from wild vines deep in the jungle, that had to be delivered to Leopold's agents every 2 weeks. The quotas were impossibly high. Harvesting the required amount meant spending almost every waking hour in the jungle. It meant neglecting farms. It meant families going hungry. It meant leaving villages unprotected. It meant men collapsing from exhaustion and being forced to continue anyway. And if the quota was not met, the punishment was designed to make the entire community afraid. For every bullet fired, a human hand had to be produced as proof. Read that again. For every bullet fired, a human hand had to be produced as proof. Baskets of severed human hands became the currency of Leopold's Congo. Soldiers collected them. Supervisors counted them. Officers submitted them as proof of efficiency. When soldiers fired bullets at animals, or fired into the air, they needed hands to account for the ammunition. So they cut them from living people. From people who had done nothing wrong. From women. From children. A central instrument of terror was the shikot, a whip made of raw sun-dried hippopotamus hide. Blows left permanent scars. More than 25 strokes could cause unconsciousness. Punishments of 100 strokes or more were often fatal. In Léopoldville itself, the city Leopold had built as his showcase capital, children were being publicly whipped. This was not the edge of the empire. This was the center. Leopold was extraordinarily careful about his public image. He funded humanitarian organizations. He gave speeches about civilizing Africa. He invited carefully selected journalists to visit the Congo and see only what he wanted them to see. He paid writers to publish flattering accounts. But the truth was impossible to contain completely. Missionaries were everywhere in the Congo. And unlike Leopold's paid journalists, they could not be controlled. They saw everything. They documented everything. They photographed everything. And then came E.D. Morel. Morel was not a journalist. He was not an activist. He was a clerk at a shipping company who noticed something that nobody else had thought to question. Ships arrived in Belgium from the Congo loaded with rubber and ivory. And the ships that went back to the Congo were loaded not with trade goods, not with payment of any kind, but with weapons and ammunition. There was only one explanation. The rubber was not being traded. It was being taken by force. Morel spent the next decade building an international campaign against Leopold. He gathered testimony from missionaries. He published photographs, the first time atrocity photographs had ever been used in a political campaign. He built a coalition that included Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, who wrote a book called The Crime of the Congo. The pressure became impossible to ignore. In 1908, under the pressure of international groups, the Belgian government took control of the Congo Free State as a colony of Belgium. Leopold was forced to hand over his personal possession. He did not go quietly. He spent his final years burning documents, destroying the evidence of what had happened in his name. Entire archives went up in smoke. He died in 1909, one of the wealthiest men in Europe. The fortune he had built on severed hands and rubber quotas had funded grand public buildings across Belgium. Monuments, museums, parks. A legacy of beauty built on a foundation of horror. How many people died? This is the question that historians have argued about for over a century. Leopold destroyed so many records that precise figures may never be known. 10 million people. In 23 years. That is more than the entire population of Belgium at the time. It happened not through gas chambers or firing squads, though there was plenty of murder. It happened through starvation, through exhaustion, through disease, through the destruction of communities, through the collapse of the food supply when every man was forced into the jungle to harvest rubber instead of farming. It happened because one man decided that 10 million lives were worth less than the price of rubber on the European market. And the city that bore his name, Léopoldville, was the headquarters of the entire operation. In 1960, the Congo gained independence from Belgium. The new nation renamed the colony the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the city of Léopoldville, named after the man who had turned the country into a personal death camp, was renamed. In 1966 it became Kinshasa. Today Kinshasa is home to over 17 million people. It is the third largest city in Africa. It sits on the same banks of the Congo River where Leopold's agents first built their trading post. The city has been through coups, dictatorships, civil wars, and economic collapse in the 60 years since independence. The legacy of what Leopold did, the destruction of communities, the elimination of entire generations, the looting of natural resources that has never truly stopped, runs through every decade of Congolese history since. In Belgium, the debate about Leopold's legacy continues. During the international protests in 2020, several statues of Leopold II were vandalized, and petitions calling for their removal were signed by tens of thousands of Belgians. Some of his statues still stand. In 2020, 112 years after Leopold was forced out of the Congo, the Belgian king released a statement expressing his deepest regret for the wounds of the colonial past. Deepest regret. For 10 million people. There is a photograph that became the symbol of everything Leopold did in the Congo. A Congolese man named Nsala sits on a mission veranda. In front of him on the ground are the severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter. She had been killed and mutilated because her village had not met its rubber quota. The photograph was taken by a missionary in 1904. It was published in newspapers across Europe and America. It shocked the world. It helped end Leopold's rule. But it could not bring back 10 million people. It could not give Nsala back his daughter. Léopoldville was built on blood. Kinshasa was born from it. And the city on the Congo River is still carrying the weight of what one man did from a palace in Brussels, a man who never once came to see what he had built. If this story moved you, if you think the world needs to know what happened here, hit subscribe right now and share this video with one person today. History this dark does not stay buried by accident. It stays buried because not enough people talk about it. And drop a comment below. Tell me, did you know Leopold's name before today? Because most people do not. And that is exactly the problem. Every city has shadows. We go there.